In this morning's Old Testament lesson, we get just a little taste of the whole story of Joseph and his brothers. It's just one part of an epic story that takes 14 chapters of the book of Genesis in the Old Testament. The story begins with Joseph and the coat of many colors. You've probably heard of the coat of many colors. Joseph was the youngest of 11 brothers, and he was his father's favorite. And his father had this coat made, this fancy coat of many colors, and he gave it to Joseph. And so that made all of his older brothers jealous. And when Joseph told his brothers about his dreams that someday he was going to be Lord over them, that made them even more jealous. So one day, Joseph's brothers were out keeping the sheep a long ways away in the wilderness. And so Joseph's father, Jacob, sent Joseph to them and said, go check on them and see how they're doing and then come back and give me word. So Joseph makes the long trek out to the wilderness, and when his brothers see him coming, they say, here comes this dreamer. Let's get rid of him now. So they throw him into a pit, and they talk about what they're going to do to him. Some of them say, let's just kill him. And others say, no, let's make a deal. And they see a line of camels coming, a caravan of traders on the way to Egypt. And so they sell Joseph to the traders, and he leaves in chains. The traders take him to Egypt, where they sell him as a slave, and he ends up in a prison, which you would think would be the end of the story for Joseph. You're not going to go anywhere from being at the very bottom. But Joseph has a gift of interpreting dreams, which is very valuable in Egypt. And he rises out of the prison and eventually rises in society until he becomes Pharaoh's #1 administrator, the most powerful person in Egypt except for Pharaoh himself. And that's where our reading from today begins. Well, there's a little bit more, I guess. Years go by, and a famine covers the whole land, including the land of Canaan, where Joseph's brothers and his father are still living. And they run out of food, and they have to go to Egypt to try to buy some grains to feed their families. So the brothers bring their donkeys to Egypt to get some grain, and when they get there, Joseph recognizes them. And that's where our reading for today begins. The brothers stood in front of Joseph, who recognized them. He knew who they were, but they didn't recognize him because he had on Egyptian clothing and he spoke in Egyptian. But then Joseph spoke to them in their own language, and he says, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery years ago. Well, just imagine how the brothers felt. It says they felt dismay. I'm sure they felt guilty. They felt afraid that Joseph might do something. He had complete power over their lives. He could have them killed. He could have them thrown into prison. They were at Joseph's mercy at this point. But Joseph didn't do to them what they had done to him. The first thing he did was to ask about his father. Is my father still alive, he said. And then he reassured them that he wasn't going to punish them. Joseph said, don't worry about the fact that you sold me into slavery. When you sold me, it was actually God at work sending me to Egypt to prepare for your little ones that they would have enough food to eat. You meant it for evil, but God used it for good. So don't worry. I'm going to provide for you and for your families. Now Joseph could have been vengeful. He could have put them in prison or put them to death, but he didn't. He rose above those feelings of jealousy and revenge. He put away his bitterness and his anger. In a word, he was bigger than they were. You know, Joseph's brothers were weak, suspicious, vengeful, cynical men. And they couldn't imagine how Joseph could forgive them for what they did, because they couldn't imagine themselves ever doing that. But Joseph was a bigger person than they were. He was able to overlook their evil intentions and see things from a bigger perspective. Joseph was able to forgive the harm they had done to him because he was a bigger person. You know, a small person harbors slights and grudges and suspicions and old faults, but a bigger person has the ability to overlook them. A small person is spiteful and jealous and selfish, but a big person is able to forgive, able to show mercy, to assume the best. A big person is more mature, wiser, more generous. That was Joseph. Now, in our gospel lesson today, Jesus is teaching the crowd about how to behave. He says, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. And what he's doing here is setting up contrasts. A bigger person is able to forgive, able to bless, able to love, able to pray. But a small person creates enemies, hates, curses, and abuses. And what Jesus is saying here is, be the bigger person. You know, if someone makes themselves your enemy, don't make them your enemy too. Don't do the same thing. Don't stoop to their level. If someone hates you, don't stoop to their level and hate them. Instead, be a bigger person. Do good to them. If someone curses you, don't curse them back, but give them a blessing. If someone abuses you, don't become an abusive person yourself, but pray for them. He's not saying to be a doormat. You need to stand up for yourself and defend yourself, but don't become like the person who has abused you. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The golden rule. In other words, be a bigger person. Jesus says, isn't God merciful to you? Doesn't God forgive your sins and your shortcomings? Doesn't he hold back from punishing you? So be like God. Be merciful as your Father is merciful. Be big like God is big. When I was a kid, I got into a scrap with my little brother. I probably taunted him until he hit me. And I was about ready to hit him back when my mother said, don't do it. Don't hit him back. I said, but he hit me first. She said, you're the older brother. You should know better. Be a bigger person. And of course, Mom's right. When you live in a transactional world, it's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You hit me, I hit you back. You hate me, I hate you back. But Jesus is saying, we can do better than that. We can be bigger than that. We can rise above it. There is so much turmoil and disruption happening in our country right now. Things are changing so fast. We don't know what's going to hit us tomorrow. And we see cruelty and heartlessness all around us. I know for myself, when I feel threatened and vulnerable, it's easy for me to be just as mean and heartless as those who threaten me. But I think it's important for us not to sink to that level. We cannot let the most immature set the tone for the rest of us. We can't become the very thing we hate. We have to be bigger. It's like a sheepdog, big old sheepdog walking through the dog park. All the little dogs circling around the big dog. The little dogs are yapping and barking and snarling. But the big dog doesn't pay any attention. He just keeps on walking. Be the big dog. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. And pray for those who abuse you.